Hello and welcome back to the Epic Investor Podcast. My name is James Morrell and I'm here today with my partners Rich Jarvis and Jason Morris. And today we're going to be discussing how embracing fear and uncertainty can set the foundation for a more meaningful future. Let's get started. I wanted to start this episode off with a quote that I've always liked from Shakespeare. There is nothing either good or bad, but thinking makes it so. That obviously isn't the case for everything in life, but I think it is relatable because oftentimes things happen, right? And you naturally think good, bad, good, bad.
Say it one more time. Read that quote one more time.
There is nothing either good or bad, but thinking makes it so.
Wow.
Kind of alluding to the fact that, it's more about your thoughts about what's happening versus what's actually happening that dictates whether it's good or bad. It's in everyone's lives, things happen. You think good, bad, not really knowing that something that you perceive as bad could ultimately lead to a great outcome. You just don't know it. A quick parable I want to read, it's called The Farmer's Luck. Once upon a time, there was a farmer who worked his crops for many years. One day his horse ran away and his neighbors said, bad luck. And he says, maybe so, maybe not. And the next day the horse comes back with 3 wild horses. And the neighbors go, oh, that's great. And he says, maybe so, maybe not. And then the next day, his son breaks his leg on one of the horses. And his neighbors, of course, say, oh, this terrible fortune, I'm so sorry. And he says, maybe so, maybe not. And finally, the next day, the military comes in and says, we're drafting young men. And they notice that the son's leg is broken. And so they don't draft him. And neighbors say, oh, such good fortune, such good luck. And he says, maybe so, maybe not. It's really hard to weigh the impact of an event. You obviously you're making your best guess at what's good or bad, but overall, there's plenty of examples, I think, in our lives where you thought something was good and maybe it wasn't. Or like maybe the world's crashing down in your opinion, and all of a sudden, like our last episode, you break through, you find a way. And so that bad thing that happened might end up being the best thing that ever happened to you. So I would love to get your guys' opinions, either personally or professionally, on a time you've embraced uncertainty and fear, and how maybe at first there was a cloudy outlook, but it ended up being something positive. And so I think, Jason, on the private equity side, for example, when you're looking at a new business, there's probably so many uncertain things as far as who's the team and where is it located and what's the business model, and probably so many things to think about that could sort of trigger uncertainty in your mind. How do you handle it? And has there been a time where you thought, oh, this could be maybe good and end up being bad, or vice versa? Do you have an example of that?
Yeah, well, and it's interesting. The first thing I thought of in my head was when we've purchased companies in the past, we never have 100% certainty of the entire layout. You can't. A business has been operating for 15 or 20 years. You've come into the picture for a few months. You've done some due diligence. You're not necessarily allowed in on the day-to-day because they don't want to spook employees or vendors. And so you have a very standoffish approach. And so you hope to be at like a 70 or 80% certainty when you go into buying a business, where you've now deployed capital, which is typically a guaranteed note or investor funds. There's some anxiety with that. Going into a business that appears to be well running and appears to have the team that's in place. You haven't had access to employee files, so you don't know. You have an idea, you think, you feel. And then you get into the trench. Day one, you're now the new boss. Nobody knows you from Adam. You hope that your people skills will carry you for a period of time until you can, obtain trust and respect from those people. So I can't think of one time, James. I think of every time. Every single experience I've had has been an absolute test of faith, of did I read the numbers the right way? Do I understand the market the right way? Do I understand trends the right way? Can I maneuver through this the right way? And so I crave that feeling. I crave the eustress of the moment, right? And you are relying on your team's talents and abilities to overcome any of the fear that you've put into your own head. I love that the parable. Really, it's inside your head, you're doom and gloom, but man, everything outside and on the surface is we're going to win at all costs. So yeah, I've got lots of experiences where they've turned out better than I thought. And I've got lots of experiences where they haven't turned out anywhere close to what we thought.
Right.
So
I imagine on all the good ones, though, no matter what, you had to embrace some level of uncertainty. And the alternative, right, if you don't do that, you just sit still, you're stagnant, you never accomplish anything, right? You never move forward with anything.
I had one that just came to mind. We bought an asphalt maintenance company, and day 2, I was in the truck driving to Chobani, their factory in Twin Falls.
Mm-hmm.
I did not have any asphalt background. I grew up landscaping. I mean, I understand trades, but I couldn't speak to any level of competency about the chemical relationship between the oil to the hot mix and how many inches we were going to lay and how much pressure we were going to put down on the roll. I knew that asphalt was hot and black. And here I am going to Chobani to try to win a contract, right? Lots of uncertainty, lots of fear. Now I'm representing a company that we just borrowed money to buy, and I'm going to go close a deal with a fairly large, prominent customer, that word of mouth gets out. So I spent my 2-hour drive, listening and studying as much as I could before making that pitch. But
exactly,
we got
cool.
the deal, by the way.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
That came full circle then, right? Embrace the uncertainty. Well, cool. I love that. Rich, how about you? Just a time in your life, personally, professionally, when you had to embrace fear, uncertainty, and how'd it turn out?
There's been so many times, like I can't think of one that there hasn't been fear and uncertainty that's involved. And first, I just want to say, having fear is okay. You can be very courageous and fearful at the same time. I had just finished my executive MBA, got a position in California, so we moved out there. And we had an idea of what it was going to be. And the month that we moved out, we signed a year lease, which, by the way, it's much more expensive in the Bay Area than it is out here. So we kind of signed that away. And that first month, the merger acquisition fell through. Things didn't turn out. So I was sitting in California with a year lease and had no clue what I was going to do next. So embracing that fear and uncertainty, I think that was, so what do I do? Well, I decided to start a tech company. But how I did it, I went and I started driving for Uber and Lyft. That was a big thing back in 2017. I was like, well, how am I going to figure out what I need to focus on? And so I ended up interviewing my rides. So I was driving the financial district of San Francisco, and granted, not everyone was a good match, but out of the 1,000+ rides that I gave in that time, probably had good 400 strong interviews. The chief marketing officer at Twitter at the time, or just companies in the financial district. All of that information gave me the framework to move forward and start a company called Unison, and I have 2 patents from that because of that experience. But that was my experience of driving Uber and Lyft to do my market research in California at a time when I had no clue what I was going to do next.
Right. That's amazing. And back to what you said about courage, I think I've heard a quote before, like, courage is not about the absence of fear. It is the, choice to act despite that fear and despite that uncertainty. That's what really separates people. Not being paralyzed, but choosing, I can still have fear. I can still be afraid of whatever. We were talking about how we were scared to do this podcast for a while, but here we are. Anything that good that happens in life, I think overall, it starts with just taking that step out of your comfort zone into uncertainty.
I think that's the magic piece right there, taking that first step. Having courage, even though you are fearful, but nothing happens until you actually take that leap of faith and you take a step in the darkness, and then all of a sudden some light comes around it and you can see where you're going, and you do it again. Those of you who are Brandon Sanderson fans, in the Stormlight Archives in The Way of Kings, but there's a general, he's got the weight of the fate of the world on his shoulders, and he's trying to figure out what is the most important step a man can take, or a woman in this. It doesn't matter. What's the most important step someone can take? This is where I want to go. And it's your first step, it's kind of like you're in molasses. You're so scared you don't know what to do. And that inertia just to get moving, is that the one that's the most important? Or is it when you actually cross that finish line and take that step and yes, I did it, you made it? And what he comes to realize is the most important step is not the first, and it's not the last. The most important step someone can take is the next step, regardless of where they're at. I mean, they're fantasy books and our family loves them, but man, what an awesome lesson that is.
It's so cool.
But to embrace uncertainty, doesn't matter where you're at, the most important step is going to be your next one.
Exactly. And you have to keep moving forward no matter what. Yeah. Well, I think also a cool way to view things. I know we talked about that first quote and not framing things as good or bad, but I think one helpful analogy is sometimes, you guys are familiar with Jocko Willink, former Navy SEAL. He wrote the book Extreme Ownership. He has a podcast and he has that video and it's called Good. And it's really intense and cool. But I think it's a helpful way to look at life sometimes because while I mentioned before, you don't always want to label things good or bad. If you can, label things as good always. Like I didn't get the job or I failed my test or whatever happened that you would perceive as bad, always say good because in his words, something good will come from it. You'll find a way to adjust and adapt and overcome that issue. And that ultimately is a form of embracing uncertainty and just deciding, hey, whatever happens, that's the path I'm going to choose, the mindset I'm going to have, and the approach I'm going to take.
Love that.
And that's going to
dive that further for those that have never seen it or
Sure. So again, Jocko Willink, if you don't know him, is a retired Navy SEAL, and he has a podcast, lots of leadership concepts and principles, but he has this quick video and it's called Good. And he says, whenever something goes wrong, failure, setback, injury, delay, betrayal, his immediate response is always good in his really deep, intimidating voice. How he puts it, he says, again, didn't get promoted, good. More time to get better. Got injured, good. Needed a break from training. And the list goes on, right? You can always find a way to say whatever happened for the most part in life is good, and here's why. You can kind of write your own story and create the path and write your own book, essentially. And it's hard to do that, right? It's hard to do that because negativity is out there and it's easy to get into a negative mindset. In the hustle and bustle of life, things get busy. But overall, if you can kind of have that structure back to our last episode and really approach life with an intentional mindset and framework of like, I'm just going to take this as it is and go with the flow and roll with the punches and maybe even label it just as good because that mindset is going to drive me forward and will ultimately lead to a better outcome for myself, for my family, my team, and so forth.
I love that. And I haven't seen the video. So now I'm going to go look at it. And when I hear that, what I think about is regardless of all these bad things happening, his response, good, to me, that's almost bringing in gratitude in life. No matter what's happening, what is the good around you? What's the good that you're going through? And I think reframing it right there for what can come out of it, that's good. The times in life when I've been faced with fear and uncertainty, I have to admit, I didn't approach it by saying good.
Right.
I was pretty frustrated at the time, right? But the times that I could step back and show gratitude and just think about all I was grateful for, there was something that happened to that mist of darkness, right? That fog of war, I think you mentioned in the last podcast, just that cloud, being grateful lifted that up to where I had the courage that I could move on. But it was that gratitude and saying good that I think made the difference.
Exactly.
That's awesome. I love
It's kind of like a form of radical acceptance almost, right? Like when what you resist persists, and when you're pushing something away and saying this is bad and I don't want this to happen, sometimes in life for me, those bad things, you almost attract it to your life. So I think that form of radical acceptance and saying, hey, I'm going to, it doesn't mean I can't change things or, set goals or try to make my life different. But overall, when you approach it with this mindset of, all right, whatever just happened, take it as it is, good, let's keep rolling forward. That's the mindset I think of a winner overall.
Well, and what you focus on grows, right? And so if you're going to focus on the fog of it, that's going to consume you, right? If you can focus on the good that comes from it, then you're going to grow. I've got 5 kids, and I'm constantly in this state of wondering, am I doing it wrong? I mean, these are people's lives that are, quite literally in my stewardship. And for a long time, I've got a 13-year-old son. He's my only boy. And for a long time, I wanted him to like suppress his feelings. Like, don't get mad, don't cry, don't get angry. And And over the last couple of years, I've shifted my perspective on that and said, let it have its moment. For these moments with Jocko Willink, right? Like, didn't get the mission. Good. Embrace that. I keep thinking to myself, lean into it. Like, let it have its moment so you can analyze it and assess it. For example, I won't pick a professional team just out of respect for everybody. But if a quarterback throws a ball to a tight end or a wide receiver and they drop it, typically the next play is right back at them. One, to provide them courage, encouragement. We trust you. We believe in you. It's coming back to you, right? But that player had his moment or her moment of, I don't suck. I know how to do this. I had a hiccup. Catch the ball, right? And the next time, catch it and move on, right? I also coach my son's baseball team. If you continually put up excuses of why something happened and why it's not your fault, you don't ever get to embrace it. You can't lean into the opportunity for growth. I remember on an occasion where I was leaving a company to go help another one, and I had screwed something up pretty well. And it was an oversight. I thought that the system had its own formulation and would catch it, but I didn't verify it. And at the end of the year, we had a huge discrepancy, right? Well, when that happened as I was going to the next company, and even driving the moving truck on the phone with my board, like, this sucks. Like, this is a really bad situation, and I'm at the helm. We had transformational growth in the next project because of that problem, right? So you got to lean into it. Yes, say good and focus on the good, right? What you focus on grows, but let it have its moment. Like, embrace it, lean into it.
Sit with it. Yeah, exactly.
I love that.
Let it simmer.
Yeah, well, I think this topic is awesome, and I think it would be important for us to relate this back to our overall mission at Epic Capital, which is helping our investors and all of our relationships achieve freedom of purpose. How does it relate back? I think the first thing that comes to mind for me is on the investment side, putting all your hard-earned capital into something is scary. It's uncertain, but you kind of have to do it to move forward. I'm not saying to make an unwise decision. Obviously, do your due diligence and make sure you're comfortable with all the teams and everything that's happening. But if you don't embrace that uncertainty and that fear, you don't invest, you don't advance yourself forward. As we mentioned in the last episode, if you want something to change in your life, you have to change something. And that might be that first step forward of embracing uncertainty. So for both of you, either one can start first. I'll go with Rich, I guess.
Sure.
Is there a way that you see this message of embracing uncertainty and fear relating back to our core purpose as a company?
No, I think this is a great question. Whether it's our investors or investors out there looking to invest in other things, I think there's a couple components. Embracing fear and greed is really important, or at least understanding that fear and greed exist. Warren Buffett put it as he coined it. It's a disease, and it spreads rapidly. On both sides. Fear is not something that can be taken away from someone else. Just they have to be the ones that release it. I think it's that individual. We can stand here and say all the right things to remove or supplicate that, but it's really up to the individual if they're willing to take that next step, right? I think there's things that you should do, and maybe we could even have specific podcasts on these. What are different ways that you can reduce risk, in investments and things like that. But we have our Succeed model, which we'll talk about, and essentially all that does is it's a formula that we use to go through and de-risk projects and investments. But at the end of the day, the only things that are certain are change, choice, and principles. And so I think taking it all, to moving everything off of the side and understanding things will always change. There's never going to be a situation where we start something and it remains the same. On the spiritual side, I've never read a scripture that says, "And it came to stay." Right?
Exactly.
It says, "And it came to pass." Things pass. Things will change. And then there's choice and principles. Regardless of what happens, we always have a choice. How we're going to react, how we're going to get through it. But ultimately, it comes down, for me, is what are the principles by which you operate? And what are the true principles that guide your life? And when things go wrong, good, right?
Exactly.
Say good and say, okay, what are you going to learn from it and go through it? And, Jason, you've mentioned this before in another podcast, but, I've learned far more from my failures that have ended up catapulting me, in a different direction, in the right direction than I've ever had from a success. The success, I usually think it's because of me, and it has nothing to do with me, right? Until you get the failure and you're like, oh yeah, it had nothing to do with me. Anyway, so I would just say, in embracing uncertainty and fear, I think it comes down to change, choice, and principles.
That's great. I love that. Jason, anything you would share, whether it's real estate, private equity, personal, it could be anything, how this relates back to finding that freedom of purpose in life.
Rich encapsulated it really well. That next step is fearful. And there are ways to mitigate that risk, and I would always encourage anybody that is, they have the desire to break through that glass ceiling and they're looking for alternative investments or opportunities. And there's lots of syndication out there that allows someone to put in a $50,000 investment instead of the $200,000. If you've got fear, that's good. That means you're in tune, right, with yourself. You have a soul. You understand the risks that are at stake. You're not just haphazardly throwing money somewhere hoping that it'll have a return. So I think fear is actually a good thing. It causes us to be on guard and on our toes. And we do lots of due diligence, right? Because we're afraid of what we don't know. We're afraid that we're gonna make this decision. And so the due diligence gives us some peace and some comfort. I'm a huge data guy. I love data. Data provides me peace. Data provides me understanding that, it'll suppress my fears. I've told my wife several times, like, I don't know if I can do this. And she'll say, you've done it for 20 years. What are you talking about, right? What are you afraid of? Well, so you go back to the data and it suppresses some of that. So fear is a good thing. And again, I'll say it again, you need to lean into it. If you're going to change the trajectory of your life, you've got to embrace the fear that comes with the next step. And the next step is making good decisions. And man, if you don't have a good team, just stay afraid, because that team can help shoulder some of that for you.
Exactly. Yeah. No, I love that. And I think as a closing thought, just being aware of the fear that you have in your life, like reframing it back to that good philosophy, because if you don't have fear, you're probably not doing enough. You're probably not trying to expand enough or leave your comfort zone enough or explore new routes or opportunities. If you're just comfortable all the time, and I get, you want to get to a point where you're in your career, in your relationships, and you're comfortable to a certain level.
Yeah.
But if you're always comfortable, you never have that feeling of like, oh no, what could go wrong and sweaty palms. You're probably not actually doing enough, I would say, in some level. You got to challenge yourself and really take that in, embrace that fear, and whatever it is for you, that's going to catapult you forward.
Is it Mario Andretti that said, if everything's under control, you're not going fast enough?
Yeah.
Maybe so. Yeah. I love that though. Totally true.
Or that quote where it talks about life is like riding a bike. If you're coasting, it means you're going downhill.
Exactly. Well, this has been great. I love this topic. I think call to action for anyone watching this. Again, we always say, please share your stories. I think if you can share a story where you've embraced uncertainty and fear, been in a bad situation, so to speak, but then it turned out well, those kinds of stories will help us craft our business, our decisions, how we operate as people, as men, as fathers, and as families. So please share your stories. And once again, thanks for watching this episode.